What's up, guys, and welcome back to Moan Inc. If you guys are new here, then hello! My name is Erica, and it is a pleasure to have you joining me today on the channel. Because for today's video, as you can see from the title, we, as a collective family, are going to be going into the myth of Echo and Narcissus. But before we can get into that, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. And now that you have so kindly done that, let's get into today's video. Just before we get into the myth, I did just want to give you guys a bit of a disclaimer and a bit of an explanation as to what's going on in this video. The disclaimer is that this is a general Greek mythology episode, and so therefore it is not going to be hyper-specific to a certain text. Which means that if you're coming from this having just read Ovid or maybe seeing references to Echo and Narcissus in a different text, then you have to abandon all of those intricacies. The point of this video is just to give you guys a general overview because details do change, because in the ancient world, they were writing and rewriting and adapting and readapting all of these myths to fit their specific textual purposes, whether it be because they wanted something to be read, they wanted it to be read out loud and performed, or they wanted it to be in a theatre show, whatever it happens to be. Myths change in the ancient world. And so when authors take them on, they do start to differ. And the purpose of this video is just to give you guys a very general idea of what the myth is. Now we can actually start talking about Echo and Narcissus. The myth of Echo and Narcissus is one of the most famous ancient Greek myths, probably ever. And the reason for this is mostly because we have adapted the word Narcissus in our modern day language. And it comes straight from the main character of this myth. But how does this myth go? Well, the myth actually starts from when our main character, Narcissus, is born. Right, so when he's a little babe, he's born to a beautiful nymph, and she actually brings her son to a prophet, to a seer, and asks this seer, "Is my son going to live a long and happy life?" And the seer replies and tells her, "Yeah, actually, I don't see any reason as to why he shouldn't unless he discovers himself." Right, so very ominous opening to this myth, that we already know there is a prophecy. Narcissus will be a totally happy man, boy, at whatever age he is, unless he happens to discover himself, whatever that happens to mean, because we love a prophecy that is nice and general. On the other end of things, we've got the character of Echo. Now, Echo is a nymph who lives in the forest with all of her sisters, and she is a chatterbox, to put it lightly. This nymph is known for her good energy, her extroversion, her love of chatting to people, having a good natter, all of that kind of stuff. That is what Echo is known for. And actually, in her backstory, she has been utilized by Zeus, and not in the way that you actually think. As we know, Zeus is not loyal to his wife Hera, and he likes to come down to the forest and frolic around with all of the nymphs and have his way with a bunch of them. But as he has his way with these nymphs, he knows that his wife at some point is doomed to discover his antics. And so he employs Echo, without obviously any monetary gain, but he has Echo be on standby as a distraction for Hera because he knows that she can distract his wife in conversation, which will give Zeus enough time to make a getaway. And so, even though there are multiple occasions where this doesn't happen, one day this does happen. Right, where Zeus comes down and he goes off with a couple of the nymphs and Hera can smell a rat. So Hera comes down and luckily for Zeus, Echo is waiting and is ready to go. She has her time to shine, she distracts Hera, she is just chatting away to this goddess, and Zeus does make a getaway. Unluckily for Echo though, as we know, Hera is way too smart. And the issue with Hera is not that she is a very jealous goddess, but that she hates people treating her like she's stupid. And so she decides she's going to punish Echo, right? She's actually got no evidence for what Zeus is doing, but she just knows. And so she says to Echo, "Okay, you stood here whilst my husband was doing the dirty deed in the forest with your sisters. You stood here and you distracted me and you knew what was going on. And you did all of this with your voice. So I'm going to punish you by taking away your voice and only giving you the power to reply and repeat what somebody has said." So essentially what Hera has done is that if somebody is then going to talk to Echo, She has no free will of her voice whatsoever. All she can do is repeat the last couple of words of what somebody said. And that's it. And this will therefore mean that she will never, ever be able to do this to Hera again, but also anybody else. So on one hand, we've got Echo that can't talk unless she's spoken to. And on the other side of things, we've got Narcissus with his really ominous prophecy. Okay, and when their stories converges, it is actually in the forest. Now, Narcissus, in some versions, he goes hunting with his friends. I think in most versions, in some of them, he just goes for a walk. But regardless of whether he goes to the forest with his friends or not, he is walking alone at this point. Either he loses his friends, or again, he's just on a solo walk. And as he's walking through the forest, Echo happens to be close by. And she sees Narcissus and falls madly in love with him. I mean, she emotionally drops to her knees and is just like, take me now. Now, Echo's reaction, although it is a little extreme, is actually not abnormal for Narcissus, right? So in his character, he is so beautiful that he is very used to people just thinking he's like the most gorgeous specimen on the planet. He has a whole backstory where people have, really come to him and just loved him. Men and women have just been obsessed with him because he is so gorgeous. But Narcissus himself has not really been taken with anybody in particular, right? Even though people have been in love with him, he's never been in love with anybody. He's never really been interested in others, and that's led him to quite aggressively rejecting them, shall we say. There are two main versions of this story. One is that a lot of nymphs, much like Echo, but not Echo, have shown interest in Narcissus, and he rejected all of them, so they got mad. Or it's one particular young man who had fallen in love with Narcissus, and Narcissus had also rejected him. Okay, so regardless of who felt the rejection the most, either the nymphs or this young man prayed to the goddess Nemesis and asked Nemesis to ensure that Narcissus feels the amount of pain that he has caused them. Right, Nemesis, who is the goddess of retribution, she is very happy by this, and so therefore she's sitting in the background of this story as Echo feels all the pain that all of these other people have felt. Echo is merely one of many who have fallen victim to Narcissus' good looks. So back to Narcissus' walk, and back to Echo being totally stunned by his good looks, he keeps walking through the forest and Echo follows him. Again, one way or another, they start talking. It's either that he's calling out to look for his friends again, because like I said, in some versions, he is going off to hunt with his friends. So sometimes he's calling out for them. In some versions, he just kind of hears like a rustling from the background. He hears a rustling from the trees or the bushes or twigs snapping and all of this. So he starts talking. But one way or another, he is prompted to open the conversation, which, as you guys now know, leads Echo to them being able to reply. And all she can do is repeat what he said, which after some back and forth, as you can imagine, Narcissus has had it up to here with whoever the hell it is. He either wants to have a conversation or he wants to be left alone, which I can respect. However, seeing Narcissus' growing frustration, Echo, in all versions, decides to come out of the bushes. Right, she runs out and she goes to give Narcissus a hug, which obviously startles him. And because he has not been really inclined towards any gender, any person, any being, in this case, because she's a nymph, he, again, aggressively rejects her. In every version, he says something along the lines of, I would rather die than let you have me. I wish I was joking. So naturally, Echo, as you guys can probably guess, is heartbroken by this. In fact, she immediately runs off. Right, she runs off into the forest. She runs so fast, she ends up happening upon a cave. She goes into this cave and she's overwhelmed with grief, with pain, with just the total weight of falling in love with somebody that quickly and feeling that almost disgust from them. She cannot handle it. And the way that Echo's story in this mythology comes to an end is that she stays in this cave for days, for weeks, for months. She is just so sad about the whole experience that she stays in this cave until she withers away into a rock. And that is why the ancient Greeks could explain when you went into a cave, there was an echo. And it's because her spirit, her soul, her essence was in the cave and she was there to repeat back your final words. right? Which is really sweet. I know it's really dark, but it's a really sweet idea that the ancient Greeks came up with. Absolutely tragic. Don't get me wrong, but I've always thought it was such a beautiful story to explain something that's natural that happens in the world, that they attached onto this really sad and lonely nymph. But that's not the end of the myth. That's not the end of the myth. That actually we have to catch back up with Narcissus, who again, after Echo has run away, he's just continued walking, right? But remember what I said about his prophecy, right? So he got that prophecy and now he's walking through the forest. We should be remembering, okay, he just can't discover himself, but because Nemesis was evoked by, whether it be the group of nymphs or by this one youth, Nemesis gets involved now because she sees it happening to Echo and she's like, not on my watch, Satan. So Narcissus keeps walking through the forest and he stumbles upon an opening, a clearing in the forest. And in this clearing is this little pond. Okay, little pond. I mean, it's probably a substantially sized pond, let's be honest. Walks over to it because he feels like he's kind of thirsty. And when he gets down onto his knees to lean over to cup some of the water, he sees his reflection. As I said, Narcissus has never been taken by anybody before. He's never understood the pain of rejection that he constantly is giving out to people. And so when he sees his reflection, he falls in love with his reflection. This is when he starts to understand what it feels like to be rejected. Because he leans over and he is just struck by the beauty that is looking back at him. And in every version, he starts talking to this youth that he can see. He tries to reach out to touch the youth. He tries to kiss the youth, but every single time he touches the water, the youth disappears. And in different versions, retellings, tellings, whatever it is you want to say, it's either that Narcissus never understands that this is his reflection, or in some versions, he does grow to understand that this is his reflection. But either way, at some point, he starts to realize that this is not going to happen, that he's not going to get the love that he feels for this youth back on him. He's not going to feel the same love that he feels for that person. And so Narcissus ends up staying by the water. He wants to be as close to the youth as he possibly can be. So he stays by the water for days, for weeks, for months, not eating, not sleeping, not drinking. He is just totally enchanted by this person. And because of that, over time, the grass around him, the weeds, everything starts to envelop him, and he transforms into a Narcissus flower. Which is why, according to the ancient Greeks, Narcissus flowers would grow close to ponds and why they would almost dip to look over into the water, because it was Narcissus, it was his soul, that was constantly still wanting to look out towards the youth. So that's a very general look at the myth of Echo and Narcissus. This was one of the first myths that I read and I absolutely adored it. So I will be linking all the ways that you can read the myth of Echo and Narcissus, even if you don't have the books available. I'll try and find online some good resources and link them below so that you guys can keep exploring this particular myth. And of course, if you did enjoy this video, then please do recommend some more general myth episodes that you would like to see me do in the comments below whilst you're down there checking out the description box. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll be seeing you next time with more videos here on Moan Inc. I'll see you guys then.